Hello everyone, my name is Nicola, and in this video we're going to be talking about polishing up and distributing your software. Here's a link to my GitHub, and let's get started. So here we are back at our thermostat project that we worked on in the last video. First I wanted to talk about a few scripts that are going to be helpful, and then I'll show you how to distribute your software. So first thing is I like to create a script called typecheck, which just runs the TSC compiler, and all it does is it just checks to make sure that each of your variables are associated with the correct type. So the script is very simple. We're going to call it typecheck. So all it does is it runs the TSC compiler with this -- no emit flag. So when I run npm run typecheck, on success, it doesn't actually print anything. So let me just do one example of a quick failure case. So now I've assigned our gradient to a number and then set it equal to a new gradient. So when I run typecheck, it will catch that error and give us an error message. So that's one nice quick script that you can write that's very simple and can give you a lot of insight into your code. So let me just undo that change and I'll make a quick git commit. So now that I've done that, I will show you how to write a good test script. In this project, since everything is just done on the UI, there isn't really too many test cases we could write, but I will take out some of the functionality from this event listener and pack it into its own function that we could test. So what I've done here is I've taken out our smath translate function and wrapped it into this f2c function. And now when I create my setpoint _ Celsius, that's using the new f2c function that we wrote. And this is something we could test in test script. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called test.ts. And I will, I need to make sure I export this function first, so I can import it into test.ts. And now that I have that imported, I could just run a quick test case. So here's a very simple test case function. We just want to check if -40 degrees Fahrenheit is equal to -40 degrees Celsius. If they're not equal, then we'll just throw a new error. Let's compile that and run it. So I'm actually getting an error here because I am referencing the document element in index.ts. So what we're going to want to do instead is we're actually going to break this function out into a different file called lib.ts. Copy that out and paste it in here. And I need to make sure to import smath. And that means I don't need to import it in here. But I do need to make sure I import f2c. So I can just use the import from lib. And now in test, I just need to import this from lib. And now I can run my test script. And it works perfectly. Just to check if my value is something else, if I say f2c is supposed to equal -10, that should give me the error. But it's not going to make sense because I'm checking -10 here, and then I'm writing something totally different than the error. So let me just fix that and rerun it just to make sure that it works. Something that I've actually written to help clean up your test cases is I've created a package called Xray, and we can install that as a dev dependency with npm i-d xray, and that's spelled EXRAY. So we're going to install that. And so instead of writing a whole bunch of if cases here, we can just import x from Xray. And this X object here has a whole bunch of test cases here. We can expect two values to be equal. We can expect one value to be false, one value to be greater than the other one, and so on and so on. So we're going to just do an equals case here using the f2c function, -40, and we expect it to equal -40. We can give it a custom message if the test fails, but in this case, we can just leave it as the default. And now that I have this in here, I can get rid of my test case because this runs the exact same thing. And here we go. We have a successful test run. We could also do something like print out a success message at the end of the test run. So now when I run test, I get a success message. If, for example, my test failed, then I get the failure message, but no success at the end. Anyway, so there's running your test cases. Doing things like this can really help in big projects, so when you're changing code around, you know you're not breaking things in other parts of your code, because you'll have all these tests run, and you can just run the simple test script and just ensure that all of your functions are working as intended. So since I made a bunch of changes, I'm going to go ahead and do one more commit. Now I just want to make sure that everything still works in the browser, which it should, but we did make some changes, so I just want to test it. So I have to do an npm run build. And there we go, everything built successfully. I'm going to copy over this index.html. Alright, so here we are. And yep, everything still works. And I changed the colors around a little bit from the last video, just to show how, as the colors get lighter, the new contrasting color changes to contrast better on the background. So we can see, that 31 degrees is shown in black, but then when we go up to like 53 degrees, it's shown in white. Everything seems to be working fine, so let's build and package up our project to be distributed. So here we're back in package.json where we've written all of our scripts. Right now we have a build script which builds it in development mode with this watch option on, which is great when we're developing our project because we can just run this script once and then anytime we make a change to a file, it'll just rebuild everything. But what we want to do here is we're going to change this script name to, we'll call it dev, just so we know when we run npm run dev, this basically will build it in development mode. If we want to do a build, this would be a full production build, which is going to be a very similar command. It's going to be webpack -- mode production. And then we also do not want to include that watch option because we just want to build it once. Also, we might want to run the clean script first. So we could do npm run clean in here and install our dependencies here. So when we run this build script, it's going to clean out everything here. It's going to reinstall everything, and then it will build in production. So let's just make sure that that works. I'm going to do npm run build. So we can see everything was cleaned out, and now it's installing all of the dependencies again. And now we've successfully built one file here called main.js. And we can see it actually looks different than it did before because now that it's in production mode, it's basically minified everything, it's crunched down everything into the smallest file that it possibly can, which is great for production builds because when you're in your browser, it has to download all of the scripts, and the smaller the script, the less bandwidth you use and the faster it'll load. So anyway, now that we've built it, there's a last few steps in here before we want to package it up. You might want to add some instructions in the README. You might want to add a few notes in the changelog here. Alright, now that we've made those changes, our project is finally ready to be distributed. One final check. Since we have rebuilt this using the production mode, we can just double check to see if it still works in our browser. So after a refresh and changing the value of the slider, it still seems to work just fine. So that's perfect. If we go into the inspect tool and then go to sources, we can open up that dist folder and we can see main.js. And this was the built file that I was just showing you earlier. So anyway, now we have all of our files ready to be distributed. I'm going to create one more command to package everything up into a single zip file that we can send to anyone to use. Alright, so what I've done here is I've created a new script I called package. It's using the built-in zip command with a recursive flag. It's going to create the file called thermostat.zip, containing all of our HTML files, all of our CSS, all of our markdown files, and then everything in the dist folder. What we could do now is we could run npm run package, and now we can see some of the output of that command. And now we have this new file, thermostat.zip. We can send it to anyone, they can unzip it and just run the program. Alright, so here we are. This is just simulating a new environment. For example, like if I sent this to a friend, this would be what it looks like in their folder. So they have this one file, thermostat.zip. We're going to right click and extract, which is going to create all of these files here. So we have our README file, which has our instructions in here. We have our changelog with the version number. Of course, we have our dist, our index.css, and our index.html. So I'm going to just open index.html, which opened up in my browser. And now we have this file here. And you can see that the file path is in that other folder that I created. And here we go. I can change the slider, and it works. The one last thing I wanted to touch on is something called semantic versioning, everyone's favorite. So as you might have noticed, in my changelog and in my package.json file, the version was 1.0.0, which represents the first major version of that software. The second number in this group of 3 is called the minor. This reflects, the number of smaller fixes, maybe some minor upgrades, usually should be backwards compatible in the same major version. And the last number of the 3 is called the patch, and usually this is used for like bug fixes or maybe dependency upgrades, things like that don't really affect the user experience much, but should still be noted in the version number. So if you want to upgrade a patch version, all you have to do is just change the last digit and move that, or change the last digit by increasing it by 1. If you upgrade the minor version, you increase the middle digit by 1, and then you reset the patch version back down to 0. If you increase the major version, of course you increase that major number by 1, and then you set the minor and patch versions back down to 0. So anyway, the most important thing here is to just be consistent of what you're using each one of these numbers for. Major, minor, and patch seems to be the general consensus of most developers, but some people have used year, month, and day as the release date for those 3 groups of numbers. And I've seen others too, but the general guideline is just be consistent, so you don't confuse your users. Anyway, well, now you've learned the full stack of how to build a project, install dependencies, and then package up and send it to anyone. Hopefully you enjoyed this short video, and I'll see you next time.